Today I want to talk to you about a book I've recently finished, which is Siddhartha by Herman Hesse. But if you're not familiar with this novella, then you might be wondering, what is it, why I found it so interesting and so helpful to the point where I wanted to make a video about it, and what's with this title about how teachers and mentors are not going to help you. Well, there is this whole central theme of the book, which is that wisdom cannot be shared, wisdom cannot be taught, knowledge can be taught, knowledge can be given to someone else, but wisdom is different and you can only get it yourself. There is a quote that describes it really well at the very beginning of the book. Let me read that for you. Wisdom cannot be imparted. Wisdom that a wise man attempts to impart always sounds like a foolishness to someone else. Knowledge can be communicated, but not wisdom. One can find it, live it, do wonders through it, but one cannot communicate it and teach it. Herman Hesse, Siddhartha. Now, this quote resonated with me in a very special way because it immediately reminded me of a specific type of Buddhist philosophy. There are many different schools of Buddhism, and as I was exploring Eastern philosophy, I came across Zen Buddhism. And the reason why Zen became my favorite school of Buddhism is that Zen preaches finding your own path towards enlightenment. Enlightenment is, of course, a very grand topic. I don't want it to be the center of this video. But what I really like about this philosophy is how it encourages not following some kind of dogma, not following a strict set of rules. Zen Buddhism preaches that everyone already has this seed of enlightenment in them, but they have to discover it for themselves. No one else can do it for them. You can't reach it through following a set pathway. You have to work through it to build up this understanding. But it doesn't only happen in spirituality or enlightenment. It happens in very everyday skills. Before I even encountered this idea of Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, and before I even heard about Siddhartha, I was already talking with a friend about how there seems to be an element to, well, I guess not knowledge, but an element to skills, an element to many things that cannot be shared through words, that cannot be explained. Think about anything you can have expertise in. For example, cooking. Let's say you have a very specific recipe for a certain dish. It's very detailed. Every step of the way is described exactly what you have to do one by one. But when you start cooking the dish, when you prepare it for the first time, and then you prepare it for a second time, then you prepare it for a third, fourth, fifth, and so on, then you come to learn something more about this process of preparing a dish than was described in the instructions. No matter how detailed you make the recipe, it's always going to lack this element of understanding. And it goes for any sort of skill, anything you can do in life. There are some elements of it that can be taught, like the knowledge that can be shared, but no matter how much knowledge you get, there will always be things that you're lacking. This wisdom and understanding that you can only get through enough time, enough practice, or enough reflection. So this is the theme in the story that really hooked me. But let's get to how Siddhartha's journey starts. Siddhartha, by the way, is also the name of Buddha, but let's not confuse it. In this novella, Siddhartha is a completely separate character, and it doesn't describe the journey of the Buddha, even though Buddha appears as a character in the story at some point, and there he is referred to as Gautama. Meanwhile, Siddhartha starts out as the son of a Brahmin. Brahmins are something akin to high priests in Hinduism. They hold this very high position in the Hindu religion. But Siddhartha, even though he's also training to become a Brahmin, he's practicing in the rituals, he's practicing the religion, he's trying to understand more about the world, but it doesn't seem to satisfy him. Something doesn't fit, it doesn't seem like his path. He wants to achieve enlightenment, he isn't sure how to do it, but he comes to understand that becoming a Brahmin isn't how he's going to achieve it. At some point, he's inspired by Samana and decides to become one himself. And Samana are those ascetics that are practicing self-discipline, living away from the world. They own nothing, they're trying to get rid of desire and abandon all material possessions. And at the beginning, his father doesn't accept his choice, but through sheer will and stubbornness, Siddhartha eventually convinces him to give in and to let Siddhartha go on this journey. And there is also this friend who looks up to him, and he goes with him, and they both join the Samana and start practicing. And they stay there for years, they stay in the woods, they practice the self-discipline, they do the meditations and everything else that the Samana preach. But once again, something seems to be lacking. Siddhartha finds that this solution seems temporary, that he's just escaping his problems, that he's just escaping the pain of the world, that self-denial isn't the way. it only serves to give him a very temporary solution to suffering, and he looks at the very old Samana and sees that none of them achieved enlightenment. He compares them to the Brahmin and he decides that he's not going to reach enlightenment this way either. But then come the news about some enlightenment person, a saint who achieved enlightenment, and his name is Gautama, the Buddha. So Siddhartha and Govinda decide to find this saint person. They want to see them for themselves, and they leave the Samana. Of course, Samana are not happy about it, but their problem. And they go on their journey, and eventually they find the Buddha. And once they reach him, Siddhartha immediately recognizes which monk is the Buddha, and he takes one look at them and he understands that this person really reached enlightenment, that this person really achieved what he is looking for. But as they listen to the Buddha's teachings, while Govinda is convinced and immediately wants to join the monks and become a follower of Buddha, Siddhartha is once again not feeling it. This is where we circle back to this central theme that wisdom and enlightenment cannot be taught. Siddhartha has this discussion with the Buddha where he praises what the Buddha had achieved, but he also explains that he cannot follow him because he believes that he's not going to reach enlightenment through following someone else's footsteps. It's not how Buddha achieved it, and this wisdom that the Buddha has gleaned during this moment of enlightenment, it's not something that he's going to be able to put into words. He also believes that following a dogma risks simply following a set of rules without actually trying to understand them. In a certain sense, it's going the easy way, just taking things at face value, but it's also the thing that might stop you from getting the actual understanding that he's looking for. And this is where our two characters split off. Govinda decides to stay with the Buddha, while Siddhartha decides to continue his journey. But he kind of gives up on spirituality. He already met an enlightened person. He knows that he's not going to find any better teacher or any better mentor. So he decides to simply start looking, and he decides to start looking in the material world. During this part of the story, he also meets a certain ferryman that takes him across the river for free. I'm mentioning it because the character of the ferryman is going to be important later on, so remember him. And then Siddhartha reaches a pleasure grove where he meets Kamala, a courtesan, and he asks her to teach him about pleasure and about love. Then there is this whole arc where he becomes a merchant, he learns about business and money from another character called Kamaswami, he has a romance with the courtesan, Kamala, and throughout this whole process, he learns about pleasure, he learns about love, he learns about business and money, but he also becomes attached to wealth. And he spends many, many years falling down that rabbit hole, getting addicted to gambling, getting addicted to riches, until a certain day he has a prophetic dream and he realizes that he forgot his purpose. And he's terrified that he spent so much time on meaningless things that he forgot what he was really looking for. And that very day he leaves everything behind, he doesn't say goodbye, he just escapes from this whole village. Then we see him escaping through the woods and stopping near a river and falling asleep. But when he opens his eyes, he sees a Buddhist monk standing above him. And in that Buddhist monk, he recognizes his old friend Govinda. The monk doesn't recognize him until he mentions his name, and then Govinda is a bit disappointed about the state that he found Siddhartha in. They talk for a bit, but Govinda doesn't really understand what Siddhartha is doing. He doesn't understand that Siddhartha is neither a Samana, neither a rich man anymore, neither he wants to join the Buddhist monks, and eventually he leaves Siddhartha alone, and Siddhartha realizes that his entire journey is starting anew, from the very beginning. But then he starts listening to the river, and he notices that the river can teach him things. Then he goes back to where he met the ferryman, and as he's going across the river, he notices that this ferryman really radiates a sense of calmness and inner peace. And Siddhartha decides that he wants to join him. He asks him if he can live with him and if he can help on the boat, and the ferryman agrees. And so they live together, they work together, and they study the river together. The river makes Siddhartha understand many things. One of them is that time doesn't exist, that the river is everywhere all at once, and for the river only a present moment exists, but this present moment is both in the mountains, in the middle of the stream, and down where the river ends. If you don't understand, then no need to worry about it right now. Then another part of the lesson is when Kamala, the courtesan that he had a romance with, turns up with their son. Turns out that they actually have a son together, but Kamala ends up being bitten by a snake, and this son ends up under the take of Siddhartha. Now, Siddhartha really loves his son, despite never knowing him, he really loves him, and he wants to teach him everything that he has learned. He wants to help his son achieve inner peace, but the son is stubborn. The son doesn't listen, the son grew up spoiled and wealthy, and he doesn't want anything to do with Siddhartha. Then the son runs away, and Siddhartha tries to come after him, but eventually he loses him. And slowly he learns to let go of this desperate attachment to show his son the way, and he understands that his son must also walk his own path, and that it's going to probably be difficult considering how the son is acting, but just like Siddhartha left his father to go on his own way, then Siddhartha must also let his son go and make his own choices. He goes back to the ferryman, he goes back to the river, and over time his heart slowly heals. And we get to the final lesson. He once again listens to the river, but this time in the river he hears that everything is connected. He hears the voices of everything and everyone connecting into one single sound. And the pain he was feeling for his son also joins this unity, and as a result Siddhartha is free from it. He kind of surrenders to this unity, he stops struggling against fate and against the flow, and approaches life with acceptance. I understood it as the book trying to tell us that this surrender and unity is the path towards enlightenment. Now, I don't want in this moment to analyze it philosophically, but overall this is what I got as the final lesson. Then ferryman at the end of his life leaves Siddhartha and goes into the forest, and Siddhartha takes over as the ferryman. Then word spreads that there is this wise sage living near the river, and of course this sage is Siddhartha, and a certain Buddhist monk, you might already guess who, comes to see this man for himself. And once again they recognize each other, and Siddhartha shares a bit of his thoughts, and Govinda once again doesn't really understand what Siddhartha is saying, but while looking at Siddhartha, he notices his calm presence. And despite not understanding his words, he still sees something in Siddhartha, and he notices that Siddhartha has finally achieved what he was looking for, what they both were looking for, I guess. And once again, we really underline this theme that you cannot share wisdom through words. Despite Siddhartha trying to impart it on Govinda, Govinda cannot understand it. It sounds foolish to Govinda, just like the quote at the very beginning of the novella mentions. That wisdom that a wise man attempts to impart always sounds like foolishness to someone else. But then Govinda lets Siddhartha kiss his forehead, and somehow that awakens something in Govinda, and they both achieve enlightenment, and this is pretty much how the story ends. So as a quick summary, I really enjoyed it. It was both beautiful visually, and the story itself also resonated strongly. I really like philosophy that is put into the format of a story, and this book does an amazing job at it. It's very strong philosophically, but the narrative connects it into this way that it's both easier to recall, easier to consume, and gives you this emotional experience and not only academic knowledge. Maybe this is also the part where the story helps you understand the wisdom, because it's not just sharing knowledge, it's sharing something a bit more than that. I remember, I think Nietzsche also used to say something that stories are the best way to share philosophy, something akin to that. Well, that might be a topic for another video, but I definitely recommend you read this book, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.